could you please open the floor for discussion, because the new knowledge or the combined or synthesized knowledge from today's presentation is a huge, and just some suggestions how we could take it with us and what should be our next directions in our research. Carlo.
Okay, I have a couple of comments and a question for all. The first comment is a very short one. I would like to thank Joseph, because even if he doesn't present any figures or movie that could have been helpful, in any case, he made an intervention that is really complementary to the printed paper. And this, in my opinion, is very important also for future Meet the Author events, and to stimulate people to make interventions that are complementary to the what is written in the paper, at least. So the second comment is on, let's say, on a specific aspect that I noticed. So I like it the works that have been presented, that connection with the design fiction. And this because I found quite funny that in dealing with the narrative, if I'm not wrong, of course, there have been no clear reference to the production of future vision video. That actually are very relevant tool, because I remind you that the future vision has been used since 1956, and maybe you can remind, for example, the future vision by Apple, Philips Design, Nokia, just to mention some. And actually, in addition, the production of future video future vision could be a very strong way to demonstrate the transformative power of critical approach. And I understand, as has been said by one of you, that students need some skill to produce a video, but today there are a lot of very easy to use tools. And certainly students can also start by writing plots and also storyboarding. That is not far from the strip and cartoons that have been shown by a couple of you. So this was the general comment on narrative. Then I have a question. In this case, I would like to be a little bit slightly provocatory, since due to the context. Well, maybe it's due also to the short time allocated to the presentation. But actually, in most of the presentation, I didn't catch very strong conceptual differences with respect to good standard design interaction design processes that in principle should contain, imply also a critical approach to problem setting and not well-posed problem, critical analysis of the outcomes of the divergent problem solving, etc. So, I mean, for example, also aspects like the maintainability and the direction of the object and at large sustainability should be included, but often they are not. But this is a lack of the of goodness of the design process. It's not really a novelty in some sense. So the question then is, the increasing attention toward the critical design, in your opinion, is due more to the increasing complexity of the scenarios and of the increasing number of dimensions that year after year are taken in consideration by the design processes, or is a consequence of the decreasing capacity of the students to use a critical perspective in desigin processes? So this, of course, I wonder also if you do really need sustainable goals to stimulate student capacity to act critically. And if, with respect to the previous question, if the case is the latter, how could we reduce the role of teacher facilitator as a problematizer? Is there anyone that you would like to answer?
Your question was so long, so complex. I think.
There are some comments. I just repeat the
Yes.
question shortly. Okay. So I made some comments that I hope you got anyway. You catch the meaning of my comment. And the final question was, let's say the attention toward critical design is due more to the increasing complexity of the scenarios and of the increasing number of dimensions that are taken in consideration year after year. There's a transformation of the process by the design process, or on the other hand, are a consequence of the decreasing capacity of the students to use critical perspective in participating in design process. And if the latter is the case, how could we reduce the role of teacher as facilitator, as problematizer?
Can I respond? It's a long question still, but I just wanted to say that to me, I think it's not the latter. So I don't think the students are becoming less critical. Actually, I think they are becoming more critical. And that I think we don't need to provoke them to be more critical. I think for me, my role as teacher would be to facilitate them to not be paralyzed, but be able to deal with this more complex situation and complex role that they take on and want to take on as designers, I guess. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it's a possible answer. I would like to listen also to the others.
Eva, please.
Yeah, I agree with Leneke. I think that it's not a lack of creativity on the students, but I think that it's the whole situation, especially when, I mean, my case is a bit different. So I think I would like here also to hear about those who have been using this as a teaching or learning strategy. But I think that the strength of the speculative and critical design is that it allows to consider multiple situations of what will happen if. I mean, you have this technique of already in design, what if, but I think that this brings more to the forefront and forces you to consider different scenarios and how the future might unfold. And in a way, like talking about the future, it's also talking about the present, or how do you see the present? So I think it's a tool for bringing the system thinking in the already, like from when thinking about what will happen when you implement the technology or you explore a particular situation.
Thank you, Eva. And Alma, please.
I'm unmute, yeah. Slightly different take. I agree with you. I don't think students are less critical, but I think that visualizing the future, which is really necessary if you want to steer the development in a certain direction, is necessary. And I think that to see the future from all its multiple aspects is sometimes really hard for students. And for that, I believe that you can't get or do away with teachers. It's really necessary to support the processes and to stick with it. When I listened to Tom's presentation, he says students find it lightweight, or they don't engage in the right way. And I think it is important to explain why we need to do this. From our experience, we see that they struggle in the beginning of every semester to get a concept, to get a vision, to get something to grab on when they don't have users to work with. That was the other thing that we completely agree with you as well. So yeah, I don't think you can do away with teacher because of these things. These processes really need to be facilitated.
Thank you, Alma. And Oscar, please.
I was trying to situate one of the first presenters when he mentioned that comments from the students, when we normally organize them in groups, and it was related with the creative confidence, okay? And if you all noticed, one of the comments of the students, I don't know if it was Jordi, now I lost track of who really was presenting this work. I was trying to look it quickly up here in the authors, but I lost track. But it was related with the creative confidence. And if you noticed, what the students wanted was the individual opportunity to really get in these instruments. So I don't think they have any lack of really being critical. Maybe at a certain point, what we noticed, I think IxD also shared that with us, what they might lack is need to contextualize a topic, need further information on some kind of more complex concept. And that's our responsibility to really help them get the correct readings into place or help them in some point. Critical thinking, they have access to such a lot of information. They can integrate all that. They have a critical, I mean, this was a long journey to get our students into this state of mind. I don't think that's what we are losing, Carlo. I don't think it's that. What we might be losing
Sorry, Oscar. I will just to specify that to be critical means also to be logical in being critical. Okay,
yes.
Not just to be critical. This is very easy for young people, but to have a logic in their critics is not so easy.
Yes, Carlo, but you understand, if the context is not in place, if the concepts you need to produce a rationale on, a critical rationale on, if they are not in place, they have the critical attitude, but they don't have the basic contextual instruments to get into it. And I think that's our responsibility. So I wouldn't put it at the problematizer, but a facilitator to really put the correct things in context, or else it will be a big nuisance. I think what happened with IxD is a marvelous example for us to be very careful with what we are doing.
Thank you, Oscar. And we have Natalia and then Eva, and also Tom raised his hand. Okay, Natalia, please.
Hello, everybody. I would like to share my opinion about the question, because I recognize that the creative process have in self critical thinking. So I recognize that my students also have critical thinking, but from Latin America, we thought that we need to facilitate more the critical thinking in our students, because we have a history of violence with critical thinking. Yes, it has to be with political issues, because here in Latin America, the voice of the outsider or the voice of the critical that propose a change of the movement is so violence, kill it, kill the voice is more often to shut up that voice. So with our students here, we need to promote more that critical voice emerge. Yes, because they're still on that voice, but it's so quiet, because we need to quiet, because if you don't quiet that voice, you could point it, you could kill it, yes, or something like that. But I recognize that the process of the creative process also have critical voice inside. So there is a history here in our pedagogy or in our teaching of design, that the professors are more a problematizer than a facilitator. So here we need to change that role for for doing the student more present, for doing that voice became from the study, from the students, not for only from the professor. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalia. And Eva, you wanted to add?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Natalia. I think that you're bringing, so another perspective, and I think that that's really a good point to take into consideration the context and what does it mean to maybe say something, depending on what is the surrounding. But here I wanted to comment that we're talking about the word critical, and I think that maybe it will be good to have like a differentiation or meaning. What do we mean like by critical, especially when bringing speculative and critical design to education? Because many times it might feel that critical it's related with critical thinking, that yes, it's there, and there is the logical thinking and the making relations and being able to see what is not said, and so that's a whole line. But here I will say that if we bring the word critical and critical design and speculative design, I would expect that a link to critical pedagogy. And I will say that this is something that has been like already like it's a known critique, and especially in critical and speculative design, that saying that whose challenges are being like kind of discussed, what are the aspects we are focusing on, so from where these voices come. And I would say that this is something that the diversity, fairness, social justice, these are things that should be at the forefront, in my view. But maybe what we need first is to have a clarification of what do we mean by being critical in this context.
Thank you, Eva. And before giving word to Oscar and Ines, Tom, did you want to say something meanwhile?
Yeah, sure, just quickly. I think part of what we're seeing is that I think the idea of design as a category has expanded so broadly that it is not always clear, but there's sort of a design process that one should or could follow, but instead design as kind of a constant process of inquiry or engagement that in fact, I don't think reducing it to tools or reducing it to certain kinds of steps is a meaningful way for people to learn how to engage with design problems. There's a kind of such a broad realm of complex, wicked, and maybe societally threatening issues that we need to have a different set of toolkits to approach it, rather than maybe something that can be so clearly systematized and maybe supported, if that makes sense.
So Ines, please.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to add that I understand a little bit what Carlos concerned about and also Natalia was mentioning that the students, they don't lack critical thinking, but when they are in action, that's maybe a different thing also, and that was apparent in my case. And so Eva is pointing out something very important, which is to define what is the critical, because in my case, which was a complete failure on the part of facilitating, on the other hand, I actually gave the freedom to the students to be themselves the problematizers. And when you see that they engage in critical thinking, but in another moment they just step very quickly to those liberal, neoliberal means or the means that we expect from a designer, because they are insecure to propose something different when in action. So then you see that something is happening there. So I guess also Tom, in his presentation, he said something very interesting, which was sometimes or usually the students confuse the model with the practice. And so in my case, it was, so in some points of the experience, the students too quickly abandoned their thinking, and then they were just focused on brand identity or on product designing classic, because they were too afraid of proposing something that they would see or they saw during the engagement with the entrepreneur. So that was something very difficult also to try to make them see. So that's why it was also that case.
Thank you, Ines, so much.
3 quick comments. Going from the last presentation, Joe, thank you very much. It's related with what you just said. Of course, we can also try to find the best formats for this. And I completely agree with Carlo on what he mentioned. And Joe, thank you very much. I think your format of almost like a scientific pitch directly related with your paper is something that Yannick, Carlo, and myself, we were looking for. Of course, the other authors also brought in their narratives, their way of showing their work. But I think to get a quick pitch related with your paper and to get in the younger audiences, the young researchers to really look at the video and see our work, I think what Joe brought us today is what's nearer to what, as I mentioned, Yannick, Carlo, and myself, what we are looking for to relate with your papers. And Joe, thank you for that. Thank you for your work. I completely aligned with that too. I'm just a little bit more optimistic because I'm in a transdisciplinary department for more than 25 years. So I'm able of being more optimistic. So maybe that knob that goes back to the 50s might not be needed, but I understand it's a lifelong process, a lifelong political process in terms of science. And I agree with you on that. And I'm on board with you completely. Okay. And thank you, Joe, for your contribution. Forever, your first story, that means that the students didn't get the perception of their lived experiences when you are really measuring with the EEG interface. You are implicitly measuring with your EEG interface some kind of state of self or emotion. It's completely natural for that to happen. My experience I have to share with you is related with the eye tracker. The first time someone looks at their data coming from the eye tracker in an experience test, it's exactly the same thing. They said, no, that is not my eye movement. Okay. And last but not least, Natalia, thank you very, very much for your presentation. For me, it was inspiring. It took me back some 30 years for my readings of Gregory Bateson. Gregory Bateson was the founder of the Communication Research Center at Palo Alto. He's not American, he came from the UK, but he was the founder of that, and marvelous learnings came from that research center back in the 70s. Gregory Bateson, what did he find for us? He was an anthropologist, that we are differential human beings. We are differential species. So provoking is always better than explaining. You have to really nudge. You have to really shake people out of their comfort zone or comfort way of looking at things. When you really are able of shaking, provoking. So a stimulus that really gets this differential sentiment of information. Provoking is always better than explaining. Thank you very much, Natalia. It was really inspiring to get back to those differential stimulus of Gregory Bateson. Thank you, and thank you all.